Hey, this is Matt, and you're listening to Falling Uphill on 8 Ball Radio. This episode features Amy Oestreicher, Erica Molfetto, and Jeff Bennett.
I knew since the time I was born that I wanted to create. I was always making animation with my Beanie Babies or directing my friends in skits. I have always loved musical theater, and as soon as I knew what that was, I was singing and dancing till Les Mis, and just really abnormally driven. This guy was actually recommended to me. I was studying voice with this big Broadway star that had come to Connecticut, and I was so driven and kept asking these really specific questions that one day he said, I gotta tell you the truth, I'm kind of teaching to make extra money on the side, but I don't really know these questions, so I'm gonna set up a one-time consultation with my voice teacher. I'm like, oh my God, I get to study with the voice teacher of the stars. He also played Phantom of the Opera, and when he went out to audition for Phantom, the voice teacher said to him, the Phantom is Christine's mentor, so you need to go by any means possible to win her trust, even if it hurts her. Just do whatever you have to do to win her trust, and then she'll do whatever you say. And that always felt a little funny to him. Later, when I was in a coma, my mom called the actor to tell him what happened. And obviously, he felt awful. It wasn't his fault, but obviously you're going to feel some kind of guilt. He liked me so much that he wanted to start seeing me every week. And I was 15 and a Fairfield, Connecticut teenager. And I got to go into the city once a week to study with this awesome voice teacher. For me, this was the ultimate validation. I was kind of floating on air. We started getting really close. This was someone who not only loved musical theater, but could really relate to all of the esoteric, kind of deep thoughts I had. So it quickly just became more important than anything else. He would always have like a new song to show me or a new poem. And suddenly now that was the highlight of my week. And soon I just wanted to get the voice lesson over with so he could show me the latest poem. This was really kind of my spiritual muse. Our family, being so warm, welcomed him in and, ended up coming over for holidays. And our family were really grateful that I had such a mentor that was kind of nurturing that side of me and really part of the family. He asked to be my godfather. When I very first started studying with him, he said that he wanted my mom there because he has a rule that if you're under 16, you need an adult there. When we started getting closer, he's like, oh, your mom can go shopping or something and come back. So who knows? But then when I started staying after lessons, he ordered Chinese for us. He gave me a toothbrush in case I needed it. And I don't brush my teeth after meals. I just wait till I go to bed. And he's like, well, I'll just keep it in the bathroom in case you need it. And then when I was 17, something that just fell out of the blue to me, with my head so high in the clouds, I guess, he started molesting me. And I froze. I went into complete shock. I was stunned to the point where I don't even remember anything that happened at all. I just remember waking up the next day just very numb and just feeling like I was overtired and not really understanding what had happened. And the only reason I could tell something was kind of internally wrong with me was, as a teen, I always loved taking these spiritual nature walks, and that would be the thrill of my day. And then I'd go home and just write pages and pages about it, or songs. But that week I tried taking my nature walks, Something wasn't connecting. My heart wasn't open. My head wasn't working in all those fun metaphors. The magic was gone. Something felt like dead inside, and I couldn't focus on that stuff. All I could focus on was the rhythm of my feet. Everything just became very mechanical, and that kind of influenced the rest of my life. That like roboticness just turned into really rigid thinking, and I started just feeling really anxious all the time. I still in my head could not relate it to this. I thought there was something wrong with me. I really just remember feeling really tired and just going through the motions of everything. And then going back for lessons, I remember at one lesson, I was trying to sing my usual song. I remember him saying to me, I don't know, the song just feels very dead. Have you been taking your nature walks? All of these secrets turned inward, manifested into guilt and shame and self-hate, and that just became a vicious cycle where I just became really, really anxious, and the pacing turned to exercise, and that was a way that I just didn't have to feel. And soon I was just alienating from my friends and family and just hiding from the world and just being very anxious. And then it was really kind of a manipulative power struggle because my family was still kind of enamored by they didn't know anything was wrong on that end. They started getting upset with me, like, Amy, what's wrong with you? And then my mom would be on the phone with my voice teacher saying, I don't know what's wrong with her. She's being so argumentative. And he would be comforting my mother, like, it's teen angst. She obviously has some problems she has to handle. When I would go back for lessons, he would start telling me, your family has a lot of power struggles. I can sense you're struggling to have your voice, and you guys all need family therapy. He was having kind of a ball manipulating all of this, and our family, who was always so close, was now fighting with each other. I didn't even know I was losing weight. My family didn't know until I had a routine physical. And then I noticed I dropped like 10 pounds, and we all just started crying, like, what happened? We were all so out of it. We started arguing with each other. Are you anorexic? No, I'm not, but I don't know what's wrong. Maybe there is something wrong with me. Over the summer, things got worse and worse. I was still going back there. This shows how out of it I was, that I could not relate that to anything he was doing. Even though he was still molesting me, at every lesson I must have just been that out of body, and so I couldn't speak up. I was still fighting with my parents. I came back to school my senior year, like 10 times more anxious than I ever was. And for the first time, I would get panic attacks in class. And everyone could tell I'd noticeably changed. I was the musical theater happy kid. And now it was like overnight, I turned into a zombie. I started feeling ostracized. And basically, it was just a living hell where I felt like I was having a breakdown, and I didn't know why. My exercise was getting worse and worse because all I wanted to do was pace around. I didn't want to sit with any of this. It was such an intense manipulation because it wasn't just sexual abuse. It was this emotional manipulation where he was kind of insane. I was 17, he was 60, and part of him really felt like in his own world he wanted to get married. He said he was kind of sick of wearing his teacher hat, and he always had to take care of everyone else. We were soulmates, and we were meant to connect on a deeper level, and his vocal principles were all about he wants to honor the higher things like art and music and beauty, and that's the sacred truth, and the voice technique is a balance of the tension of opposites. He was using that same kind of philosophy as rationalization. The soul transcends age and time, and this is coming from a sacred, true place. I had really adored him, like, as a teacher. He was like a mentor, and I was a serious student, and I wanted that. That's really why I numbed out the most. It was all a lie. I had always just tried to follow my instincts, so I ended up just writing a 2-page letter to my headmaster saying, I don't know what has gone on, something is wrong, and I think I just need 2 months off from school to just heal. And I think even the headmaster, the administration had noticed that suddenly I just wasn't caring, and this is from kind of type A, straight A students who were like, okay, Amy knows what she needs. And my mom was kind of like, what are you doing for 2 months, your senior year? I remember telling her, for 2 months, I just want to take walks on the beach with you and read books from the self-help section at Barnes & Noble. Also, during those 2 months, my mom and I did this dance retreat in the Berkshires. And my mom, during that retreat, some woman came up to her and she said, you need to look at your daughter when she's dancing. She's obviously struggling with something and she's trying to tell you something through her dance. We went to Barnes & Noble's every day. One of those times I was just wandering through the self-help section and I ended up seeing the book, The Courage to Heal. I thought it was an interesting title, so I took it out and I happened to see the subtitle, which was For Survivors of Sexual Abuse. That word felt so foreign. It really felt like something you just see on Dateline. So I almost laughed and put it back as if I picked up a crack addiction book. But then I ended up just taking it out again, kind of instinctively. And I ended up flipping open to the symptoms. And I remember reading the boxes to check off. I feel out of body, numb, I don't trust myself anymore, I feel guilty. It was really an amazing epiphany I had where I realized, holy crap, maybe this was me. Now, it wasn't just this blank anxiety I had that I didn't know where it was coming from. Now I seriously felt like I had a legitimate secret that was weighing me down that I had no idea what to do with, which was terrifying. And I just remember my panic attacks getting worse and worse, and I was just suffering with this idea of the book. Eventually, it just kind of came out where my mom actually said, did he touch you or something? I think even she was starting to wonder. And I said, yes. And then my mom, of course, started freaking out. I remember just shaking her on the beach really, really violently. And I'm like, you need to stop. Everything for the past 6 months has been so negative and so terrible for me that the last thing I need you to do by telling you is to give me more negativity. Just tell me something good right now. And of course, she's like, what the hell do you mean? I'm like, just say something good. She looked up at the sky and she said, the sky is blue. And we just repeated that over and over again. He had actually gone to Ireland. Now it came down to, he's going to call my cell phone when he gets back. What are we going to do? We were both sitting on my brother's bed for some reason. You're just me and my mom looking at my flip phone, waiting for him to call. And I made my mom pick up. He's like, Amy? And she's like, I'm so sorry. He freaks out. He's like, oh my God, Marilyn, what's wrong? Is she okay? And my mom was like, it's so sad. My family knows what you did, and you can't see her or anyone in this family anymore. And of course, him being the master at rationalization, the first thing he says is, wait, Marilyn, let's talk about this. And she's struggling to get words out. She's like, I'm sorry, goodbye. And she hung up, and my mom and I just held each other and just cried in bed. So then we were like, so what do we do? We were going to get therapy and all these kind of things, obviously. But Passover was coming up in 2 weeks. We always had 30 people in our basement and food and all that. You know, the whole idea of Passover is all about liberation and new beginnings. So we were like, okay, this is going to be our big comeback. This man is kicked out of our lives and things will all be normal after this. We didn't really know about post-traumatic stress disorder, that it takes more than a holiday to make all that stuff go away. But we had this great big ceremony and I led the Seder. That was the first time I got dressed up. I just gotten my college acceptance letters and I was trying to figure out which one to go to. And then I just ended up with a stomach ache that didn't go away. I was kind of used to stomach aches because I was trying to eat a lot to gain weight, but this was a stomach ache that was not going away. So it lasted the next day. I just remember lying in the beautiful sunshine in so much pain, drinking Coke syrup. My mom was looking up all these remedies, and then I just remember staying in the shower all night and it wasn't going away. My dad came home from work the next day and he didn't get why I was still in pain. So he just said, let's just take her to the ER just for an x-ray to just make sure there's nothing else going on. It was really divine timing because that was when my pain just really, really ramped up. And I just remember just feeling like my gut was on fire. Everything else is what's been told to me. I got out of the car and I collapsed. The surgeons cut me open, and my stomach actually just hit the ceiling of the operating room because there was so much internal pressure. And apparently when my dad heard I was going into cardiac arrest, he tried to bust into the operating room and they kicked him out. I woke up from a coma months later, very, very sedated, figuring out what was going on. And then it took some time. It wasn't immediately. I think they were waiting until I was kind of adjusting. Dr. Sam, the resident, tried to really compassionately explain to me what was going on. If there's any compassionate way to explain it, that I didn't have a stomach anymore. I couldn't eat or drink, and he didn't know if that would ever happen again. I was 18, because I was so small, I guess my dad was able to get me into the pediatric ICU. I started off at Bridgeport Hospital because this was such an emergency. After 10 emergency surgeries in the first week, I still couldn't close my belly. So I was actually transferred to Columbia in New York with just a giant mesh over my belly, which I guess is really, really dangerous. My 3 brothers in my family, they were with me every night. It was almost kind of a relief waking up because I think my life before this was so anxiety-ridden, like I was running from something. There was almost something refreshing about waking up as a child and suddenly my family was caring about me. And after everything that I just been through the past year, I needed that healing time with my family. I would always imagine that when I was discharged, I'd walk back into my room and be normal. You have this fantasy, but the hardest part for me to swallow was that how painful the transitions were. When we got out of the hospital, my parents tried to get me to see a therapist, and the therapist said she can't eat or drink, so it would be cruel to make her sit in a room and talk about her feelings. So that was how I was kind of left to heal on my own. Eventually they did take me to see a lawyer. At that point, I was so weak. And the lawyer said, she's going to have to testify, and that's going to be such a grueling process. You just need to take care of yourself right now. And so that's what I did, and by the time that happened, New York laws are so crazy that we didn't get a chance to do anything. I was being discharged because I was medically stable. I wasn't going to die, but they hadn't solved why I didn't have a digestive system yet. They were just happy they got me out of the danger zone. So now I could walk and talk and I felt fine and I wanted to do things. But I was sent home on TPN, which is the IV fluids that go right into your vein. They thought I should be happy that I was going home. But for me it was even more frightening because it's one thing when you're in the hospital and you can kind of shield yourself from the normal world. I was freaking out, how am I supposed to be normal? I can't push my IV pole for walks on the street. How am I going to survive without an ice cube? You have to think about what am I going to do with my time? How am I not going to feel like I have a purpose? All my friends are going to college. So this was the biggest anxiety in the world. And plus no kind of certainty of when the stomach thing would get resolved. It was just waiting. So I really had no roadmap or no timeline at all. A week after I got home, I saw that a local theater was having auditions for Oliver. And I had a bag on my neck, bags everywhere, and IVs. I couldn't drink. I convinced my mom to let me try out because I thought it'd just be something to do, it'd be a good experience. When I auditioned, I remember thinking, wow, I forgot I was so good. And I'm if I get an ensemble, it'll probably be good for me to just be out, even if I can't do everything. But then they offered me the lead, and of course they double cast it because they don't know if I'm going to drop dead. It was such an amazing experience, and it just reminded me how important it was to heal, one, by doing what I love, and two, just being part of a community. It was difficult being in rehearsals, not even being able to have a water bottle. By 10 o'clock every night, I had to be in rehearsals, but a 3-liter bag of TPN hooked up. It was tough, but I think without doing that, it would have been tougher. I gotta act like I'm living now. What took so long was they were waiting for all my insides to fully repair. But after that, it just became, okay, now we gotta figure out what to do about this. We gotta find a surgeon that comes up with a crazy idea. Because it wasn't there was a manual, how to put a stomach back together. It helps that my dad's a doctor. My dad called the president of NIH The president said, you need a surgeon. You need a surgeon that takes all the cases that no one else wants to deal with. And so we found that surgeon at Yale Hospital. Getting my reconstruction date was more exciting than when I was 13 and I finally got my bar mitzvah date. By this time, too, I had kind of adjusted to life. I had gotten back all my strength. I was weightlifting like crazy. I was leaping across the stage in cats. Even though I couldn't eat, things were stable. And obviously, a surgery, especially for me, shakes up everything. It became a matter of, do I want to just survive like this, or this is the risk I need to take to see if things are going to improve? It was a 2-part surgery. The first part was 19 hours, and it took 3 shifts of nurses and doctors. That was to hook up the top part. Things just did not go perfectly. There was a lot of wounds opening and fistulas developing. A fistula is like an opening in the skin after surgery. That was something I would get to know very well over the next few years. About 3.5 years later, I was finally able to eat. I was in pain, but things were going to be uncomfortable after surgery. I knew that. Then I ended up going to California. I remember lifting up my shirt every second, neurotically, because I hadn't eaten for so long. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And then I just ended up getting in more pain as I was eating. My wound actually explodes, and I had to be air-vaxxed back to Yale. I ended up staying there for 4 months. And that was the most frustrating time and scary because for the first time, doctors were kind of freaking out. First of all, no one had ever done a reconstructive surgery like this. They didn't really know what to do. So for 4 months, I was like a guinea pig. Everyone wanted to avoid another surgery. So basically that meant they tried to figure out anything else they can do. So every day it was oh, what's the procedure of the day? And I would be wheeled into interventional radiology and try something else. A tube here, a wire here. Everything they did made things worse and worse. And I was getting angry. My mom started bringing cheap art supplies to the hospital just to give me something to do. I was so just frustrated, and I had tubes stuck in me from everywhere that I just ignored them for the longest time. And then I remember waking up one morning and I was just so angry. I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning. By 5 o'clock, the doctors came in and were poking you anyway. It was so depressing because you woke up and it was total dark and you know what's ahead. You don't even want to go through it. I got up and I picked up one of the canvases for the first time. And it was dark and my mom was still sleeping. And I'm I don't even know what the hell I'm thinking. But whatever I feel, I'm going to just put it on the canvas. I had 2 more months there at Yale to go with more and more tests. But by the time I left there, I could care less what they were doing. I just wanted to finish the procedure and go back to my room and paint. So by the end of the hospital, we had really taken over that space. I had made 70 mixed media paintings. And the month after I got out, I put up an art show. These fistulas were not healing. They were getting worse and worse. Doctors would kind of turn me on and off like a faucet. Oh, you can try eating a little bit. Stuff was still coming out, and they're okay, just stop. Basically, that's how it turned into 6 of the past 10 years, not able to eat and drink anything, with still no answers. It ended by, fistulas typically heal when the bowel is given rest for 2 to 3 weeks. So for 2 to 3 weeks, we'll start you on TPN again, the IV fluid, and just stop eating for 3 weeks, and that should heal it. I got really, ironically, into cooking because I was so hungry that I needed to cook. And so I'd cook all these dinners for my family, which I know sounds like torture. And I'd spend my day, the first 6 hours of the day painting, the second 6 hours cooking, just to have something to do. It was kind of crazy. And my mom took me shopping. I started feeling hunger, and it was overtaking me. I grabbed my mom's water bottle and ran out to the parking lot. I'm holding the water bottle up to the sky. I'm I don't care what happens. I'm going to drink this. And my mom is crying, just drink it, Amy, drink it. And I drank the whole thing, and stuff was leaking all out of me. But it was a gut decision that, you know what, I don't care if I'm leaking, but I can't go crazy. So now that I was eating and drinking, I actually had the mental energy again, even though I was physically miserable. And that's how I started taking all the journal entries I had written over the years and putting together Gutless and Grateful, which turned into the one-woman musical about my life. I decided to get my first elective surgery, which is going to be my last attempt to heal this fistula. We had tried to put off surgery for so long, but we met a doctor who said he could do it. It turned into a total disaster. It turned into 3 emergency surgeries in 8 days and left me with even more medical damage. They had also nicked my bladder. So now I had to wear a catheter in a purse for the next year. 5 years later, I still have an open wound. I really regret having this surgery. We are still reaching out and looking for answers, and maybe one day there will be. I'm medically stable. I'm eating and drinking. I still have this open wound. I have an ostomy bag, which many people have, which is fine. But more than that, I have this really large wound in the middle of my stomach that causes so much malabsorption that I have to eat 8,000 calories a day because I only absorb 20%. And that also means that 80% of what I'm eating goes into this bag. And the bag is like the size of my entire stomach. So it also means I haven't sat down for 5 years because anytime I sit, my bag just leaks. We're going to Chicago this March to meet with a doctor, and they're constantly reinventing things. So I'm still touring my show all over the country, not only to theaters, but also as like a mental health and sexual assault prevention and leadership program. I always wondered how I would make something out of all this. I don't think anyone else could do this. The fact that I still have a smile on my face is kind of insane.
Troubling times. Inflection points. Information you need. Welcome to a Falling Uphill Extra with special guest Erica Molfetto. You're listening to The Issues.
Iowa man leads Iowa State troopers on an early morning chase because he says it was on his bucket list. The chase ended when troopers pulled a pit maneuver on the driver. This all happened across from Madison Elementary School on East 8th and Madison.
To be honest, it's kind of inspirational, right? Because it concludes right in front of his elementary school, almost to alert his former teachers, don't worry, I haven't peaked yet.
Halloween, a time to share the gospel. This is Ken Ham, president of the ministry building a full-size Noah's Ark near Cincinnati. Well, yesterday we learned that Halloween started out as a celebration of evil and death. Well, Halloween can actually be a great time to share the gospel. If candy is attached, kids and even parents are open to accepting almost anything into their goodie basket, including gospel tracts.
That's like the worst kind of Jehovah's Witness door-to-door gospel spreading, honestly. If I were a kid, and this happened to you as a kid, I mean, how did you deal with that?
I think I told my parents, but we kind of like laughed at it because like we knew the people that gave it to us. Like I was friends with their son, and they were like fundamentalist Christians. We're Jewish. I'm not religious now, but we definitely weren't fundamentalist Christians. So just like this guy had, instead of candy, they gave me this basically like a Jesus Noah's Ark comic book, a small miniature comic book.
If I were a kid, I think that I would. I don't think that I would come back to this place. This is ridiculous.
What's the funniest thing that you recently overheard in public?
These two women on the subway were openly and honestly talking about witchcraft. And the way that they were speaking was so frank and passionate about these concoctions they were making in their fucking, East Williamsburg apartments. Like, get over yourselves, honestly.
What's the craziest thing that's happened to you in the past 6 to 12 months?
I got fired from my job as a social media marketing manager, and it was one of those things that you could see it coming because it was like an office of 3 people. And the craziest thing was I knew that it was going to happen, so I started packing up all of my belongings weeks in advance, like absolute weeks in advance. So that way I could either quit or be fired with no drama. I could literally just walk out. So it was a Thursday when it happened, and these people sat me down and were like, listen, it's just not a good fit anymore, this, that, and the other thing. And I don't know what compelled me to say this, and I'm so happy I did. The person who fired me was like, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything to add? And I go, I don't. I'm just really glad that we're having this conversation right now because I feared a really awkward one when I quit tomorrow.
This has been a Falling Uphill Extra.
I only remember this choking fear. I just went to Freeport that day scared shitless. Talking about 1965, 66. This was the period when the Vietnam War was cranking up. And boy, did I not want to go. If you did not have some very sound basis of opting out, either health or an occupation, you were up for the draft. I had enough of a conscience to feel that it was a young guy's duty to serve in the military if there was an imminent threat to our safety and security. The war was purposeless. There was little to be achieved politically or militarily by engaging in it. You know, this whole domino effect that the government was trying to sell. Nobody really felt committed to that cause. So I found myself out of college not knowing for quite a while what I wanted to do. I was a theater major. I did a little work selling myself as a director and an actor and decided not to do that. I worked in fortune offs for a while as a stock boy. My marriage had broken up. I was married very briefly, and I was worried because I knew the draft meant I was a perfect candidate. Going to war was not exactly my idea of a good time. You know, because there are guys who like guns and who like field maneuvers, and I think who enjoy that experience. It's the barracks and ammunition and gunplay and, what is it, basic training. You know, that landscape was not where I felt at home. The Jewish guys, I mean, we weren't all Woody Allen exactly, but we weren't warriors either, or big drinkers or big partiers. Some of that's changed in my later years, but even when I watch war movies, when the action is proceeding, I can't find, who is this? Who's their enemy? What did they just do? Why are they maneuvering this way? What? Such foreign, alien territory.
What about just the idea of having to go and risk your life?
That too, although I was fairly certain that I was going to be a bad enough soldier so that no lieutenant or sergeant in his right mind would ever put me in the front lines. I was like the nerd, always chosen 18th on any team. So I was willing to do almost anything and everything to get out of the draft. I was taking teaching credits, by the way, trying to get them as fast as I could. My best friend Michael took a teaching job. My friend Hal took a teaching job. But it was not going to be long enough. I did not have credits to apply for a teaching job. And my health. And then, wait a minute. In college, I was a pretty serious smoker. I ditched it, I don't know, 40 years ago now, or more, permanently. But at that time, I was smoking enough cigarettes to develop a physical condition. It was called pneumothorax of the right lung. It means that you do enough damage to the exterior tissue of the lung so that a pimple, like a bleb, it's called, forms. And if the bleb ruptures, the vacuum between the outer coating of the lung and the inside, your lung will collapse. So pneumothorax really is a collapsed lung. It happened for the first time while I was working as a director at a summer camp. I felt enormous chest pain. And then, in February of that same year, I was in the cast of a production of Carousel at Queens College. And there was a second episode of that. And I had to be rushed to the hospital, to the emergency room. It was, open surgery. They had formally diagnosed it, and it was on the record. And so one day there it was, greeting, colon, and the rest was, please report to Whitehall Street on such and such a date for your physical examination, bring such and such and so and so. A few very, very bare necessities. And that was all you knew. You were going for a thorough medical examination to determine your classification and eligibility. And as you know, the classifications ranged from 1A to 4F. There's no capacity in which we can use you. That's what I wanted. So I reported to Freeport, a station in Freeport. The buses were all laid out to transport us to Whitehall Street for our physicals. The next part of the route was to get in those same buses and head straight for Fort Benning, Georgia, which is still a place where soldiers go to experience boot camp. The first stab came because my name was B. I was appointed the bus leader of these guys. What I was supposed to do in that capacity, I have no idea. But I didn't like that. I had to take attendance, first of all, and then they were going to tell me what my other duties were. I did have with me my toothbrush plus a folder of documents from physicians and hospital officials, all of which documented the 2 episodes of pneumothorax, which I was completely sure would save me from this worse than death experience, all right? I said to the officers who were organizing the bus trip, I think there's a mistake here because he immediately cut me off and said, get in the bus and take attendance. So this wasn't going well. The people fell into 2 camps. One, the loners like me, who were standing at the fringe, not talking much and not eager to chat. And the others who were like really talking about this as something they seemed mysteriously to be looking forward to. So the rest of it was just a drive into Manhattan with my heart pounding and my Adam's apple throbbing. I was really that scared about this. When we arrived at Whitehall Street, the first thing we were asked to do as we were marched into this cold room with fluorescent lighting was to strip completely naked. And we had a cubby, a little locker to put our clothes in. Well, okay, I'd been in showers with naked guys before, but there was something just extraordinarily dehumanizing about this. It wasn't anything directly threatening, but it just felt, again, I come back to the word dehumanizing. So we're all standing around, absolutely butt naked. And as we went into the next room, there were all kinds of stations, 5 or 6 stations, where different army officials would examine you for eyes and ear, nose and throat, for heart and chest, and so on and so forth. We all formed a line that went in sequence through the various stations, and there might have been an occasional glance, an occasional comment of this or that, but it was very, very minimal. We were told to be silent, and so there was almost no conversation throughout the entire procedure. I had, again, this safety envelope that I was sure would save me, but each officer at each station had the exact same reaction. Put it away, we have no interest in that here. Oh, fuck. So it looked like this was going to be it. No one had any interest in my records, the very thing that was going to save me. The internal narrative for me was not that I couldn't rightfully be accepted, but that I felt I had the evidence so clear to save myself from being accepted. And because I wanted out badly, I was relying on that and couldn't believe. I felt like some kind of game they were playing. I started to get paranoid. How could they reject this black and white evidence of a fairly serious physical condition that under normal circumstances would disqualify someone and earn them their 4F? I began, as I moved from station to station, to feel greater panic about my odds for getting away. Looking back, I am sure that those guys were instructed to examine, cursorily by the way, the recruits and find them fully happy and qualified to serve. The last station, just before the exit, was the commanding officer who said, "Well, Mr. Bennett, it looks as if you're fully and eminently qualified to serve in the armed forces." I said, "Yes, sir. I do understand that and I appreciate it, but I've been trying to explain to everyone along the line that I have a history of a fairly serious medical condition, and all the papers and all the doctor's statements are here with me." He said, "Let me look at them." Now, this next 30 seconds felt like an absolute eternity. So as I stood in front of this commanding officer, it was in full dress uniform, and it was with, the army jacket and the army, the medals and stuff, and I was still completely and buck naked. He didn't ask me anything else. He was just rifling the pages, turning them over one by one, after which he said to me, "I don't understand. It says here that you have a history of pneumothorax of the right lung and 2 episodes. I said, "Well, yeah, I've been trying to tell the good officers in He said, "Well, you can't serve in the armed forces under those conditions." So I said, "I can't?" He said, "No, I'm sorry." I said, "Oh, I guess," and he went with those stamps, and there was a 4F circled inside this bar. And I kept a straight face until I was able to put my clothes back on. I came outside and did a dance. I danced up and down the street, completely like a complete retard dance, if that's politically incorrect, I'm sorry. Just like an uncoordinated, awkward, stupid, silly dance of joy, because that's exactly how happy I was,
That was Amy Oestreicher, Erica Molfetto, and Jeff Bennett. I'm Matt, and this is Falling Uphill on 8 Ball Radio. I'm here every other Sunday from 1 to 2, but if you'd like to check out previous episodes of the show, just visit fallinguphill.org. The Falling Uphill podcast is also available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have comments, questions, or a story that you want to tell, I'm at fallinguphill@fallinguphill.org. See you next time.